Hi, I'm Sridhar, and in today's session, I would like to talk about HTML5 semantics, the new input types provided by HTML5, and the validation attributes. So let's define what semantics is. Think of semantics as something that describes the content of your page by defining them into various segments like header, navigation, the footer, and the key content of your web page can be divided into articles of different subject areas and sections that describe different sections. And on the right hand side, you would have stuff like ads and the related articles or something that you would want your users to also look at as an upsell. Okay, so let's go and take a look at the deeper side of semantics. I'll explain it to you. It's pretty simple. At the core of every web page, you start off with a header which has either a block or header information. In this case, this is a page level header information. If you have both header and subheader that defines your header a little bit more, then ideally I would recommend having a hgroup attribute, which is a semantic. Then we have this navigation. Trust me, I'll show you with an example of how each of these things work. So just bear with me and try to understand the logical aspects of each of the web page parts. Okay. Then we have this navigation that has various links to web pages. At the bottom we have this footer, which describes the company information, contact, email, phone numbers, or whatever that is. And then it has the copyright information. Then we come to the meat of this web page, which is articles and sections. So think of article as something that can be a standalone block of information. Let's say you have a web page for school. Think of this article as something that describes the student achievements, and this article could be explaining the teacher achievements or the professor or whatever language that you have. So then each of these articles can have their own sections and headers. Again, like I said, header is something that describes both a header or that describes both a page or block header information. On the right hand side, you have this aside, which holds the related information section, or it could have ads that show some nice good images that are attractive to people depending on the subscriber. Okay, that's about the theory. Oh, I need to talk about figure and fig caption, which we'll take a look at in the next slide. Being the mosquito hater that I am, I was looking up, and this article pretty much explained what a figure and fig caption should be. You wrap around an image with a figure semantic when you need to have an image in your article. Let's say on the right hand side, on this case it will be left hand side, but it could be in the middle of your article or on the right hand side of the article. So whenever you need to have an image that is embedded within an article, then you would use the figure semantic. And think of fig caption as something, or a fig caption semantic is really used when you need to describe your image. Right below your image you see some content right here. Then in that specific case, to describe that, you would have a fig caption semantic. Sorry for the Pascal case. It's all, when in the realistic matter, it's all in the camel case, which we'll take a look at it. So then let's take a look at what we are going to build today. We are going to build a simple web page that has a header section. Then we have this navigation section. At the very bottom we have this footer section that describes my company information that I'm going to set up in 2020. Yeah, unfortunately it has to wait that long unless somebody wants to sponsor me. On the right hand side I have my skincare products that I'm designing. Oh, by the way, buy our skincare products, but I have never tested them. Yeah, good luck in selling any of it. Then we have these three articles. One is a weather article, which is common on every web page that we see, and the weather forecast says it's going to rain today. I see bright sun and no clouds. Sounds good. Then we have this quiz questions, which I have defined into three different articles. So this is a weather article, and then I have a quiz One is a more generic quiz questions which says, hey, why did the chicken cross the road? I expect some of my users, friends who are watching this article to post some comments on my comment section of it. And then there is this more technical quiz. Why am I learning HTML5? Okay, so let's see how semantics are played in this HTML. By the way, if anybody is worried about not understanding the style sheets, then there is this wonderful website called Bootswatch. I don't know any person who has not heard of Bootstrap in the recent times, but Bootstrap is one of those wonderful user interface APIs provided by Twitter. And on top of that, Bootswatch has provided some free themes. There are some paid themes if you want to go and pay. And if you want to build a wonderful website, I have paid for one of my themes and it's absolutely wonderful. But for this demo, we'll take a look at a free version of a theme. As you look at it, it provides a style sheet for every type of element. Every type of element. But again, let's not waste too much time on that and let's focus on semantics part of it. So I'm going to go ahead and download this part of it. Just copy this content into a style sheet. So for this demo, all you need would be a notepad. Okay, so right click and say bootstrap dot. So again, CSS indicates it's a style sheet. So I'm going to copy paste that bootstrap theme that I bought, or utilizing the free version of it in this case. Then if you want to create an older, then let's take a look at the older HTML page. Since I have the luxury of Visual Studio, I'm going to go ahead and do that, but you could use Notepad or anything like that. So at the very top of the page, there is something called a doc type element, which is an instruction to the browser that says which version of HTML am I using. Okay, in older HTML4 versions, you had this doc type, and then there is this namespace. Every HTML page is again simple formation of HTML, and then each HTML has a header and a body segment. Your body segment defines the header, navigation, the section and articles part of it, and a footer section. So if anybody wants to keep following, then in the body of your HTML page, you have this header section, you have your navigation section, and then I have defined a row that contains my key hold segment called section, within which I have 3 articles which belong to 3 subject areas. One is weather, one is a normal quiz, and one is a more technical quiz. And on the right hand side, I have my aside element, which shows my ad, and I'll give you a good reason why I haven't tested it. Okay, then we have our footer segment. So let's see how to transform this into a new HTML5 semantic web page. So in my demo, I'm going to create a new HTML5 HTML. So since I have Visual Studio, I'm going to just go ahead and use that. So once I have opened my new HTML5 page, which is a blank at this point, so let me increase the font of it so that you can all see comfortably. All I'm going to do is copy paste the existing HTML4 content, paste it here, and let's transform this now. So at the very top is a doc type element. I don't need any of it. all I need is that to transform this into an HTML5 compliant page. And then again, I don't need this namespace. I'm going to get rid of that. Let's change this to title of the page to HTML5. If you looked at it, let's take a look at the parts of your web page again. Let's take a look at this slide. At the very top we have header, and we have header groups, navigation, footer, a section that can contain multiple articles which could have its own sections or headers, and an aside. Okay. Okay, let's start transforming the sections of it. So at the very top, we are going to transform this header and subheader into a nice header semantic. Again, semantics give you a logical description of the page, which could be used by search engines to understand your web page better, and again, index them better. When search engines understand your web page, it's more likely that it's going to come up with a more relevant content when somebody searches for it. Okay, so that being said, I have a header now, and with a header group that says Space Lab, and with a secondary header. And it's an interesting fact, NASA Space Lab allowed research on memory foam, which we use today to sleep comfortably. Let's transform this navigation to a nav element by doing this simple transformation. Okay, let's transform the footer, and then we'll see how our web page looks like. Clear? All I did was change this div to a nav, because logically it's all well divided. Again, if you have to do a physical separation, then you'd still need to use div, but since it's my logical separation, you don't need that, since I have defined my classes here. Then we will transform this footer segment to a nice footer semantic, and see how our web page looks at this point. Look at this. We have our footer, we have our header and subheaders, and we have our navigation menu right here. Then let's transform this. Oh, by the way, I need to show you how I referred to my bootstrap.css file. Typically you would have your style sheets in a different folder, but for this demo I have saved it in the same folder as my HTML page, so that anybody who is starting fresh can also learn HTML5. Okay, all you have to do is refer to your bootstrap.css that we downloaded a theme from, and refer that in your web page using a link element. Okay, with that being said, let's transform our sections in a more clearly defined fashion. So I'm going to replace this part of it. So if you look at it, then we have transformed our existing ID div sections classes to separate sections. So I have two sections on my web page in this case, and then I have three different articles spread out across two different sections. So the first section was more about weather, and the second segment was more about the quiz, because there are two separate logical entities. Weather is a separate logical entity and quiz is a separate entity. I have divided them into two different sections, and since I have two different types of quiz questions. One is more about the funny questions, and the second thing more about the technical questions. I have two different articles defined here. So anybody who is trying to follow, let me show them a clear view of this HTML page. We have this header segment that we have defined now. We have transformed the navigation into nav. Again, like I said, since we had to use a div element for physical separation of sections, I had to use div, and then we have this sections where we could logically separate things into different subject areas. One is the weather, it's a different subject area than a quiz subject area, and within a same section you could have different articles or different sections. In this case, I have an article that says this question and an article that asks me for a different question. Then I have my aside element which says, okay, by our skincare products, we have never tested them not to harm animals. So does it give anybody a good reason to buy? Well, not to me. Okay, let's take a look at our transformed web page here. Sweet. So I have added a date control here to show you the date. Input type is equal to date. So let's take a look at more input types that are provided by HTML5. So let's create a new form and change the if you have noticed it, I have changed the question, why am I learning HTML5 to who is learning HTML5, so that we can collect some information. So I have created a form tag, and I just wanted to show you the various input types. So if you look at the date, so the new input types that are provided by HTML5 that are more popular are the date time, date, and email, a telephone number, a color, a number. There is also a range, and which, you know, the slider that goes up and down, and checkbox. There are plenty of stuff if you look at it. So let's demonstrate some input types. Again, if you want to learn more about the input types, you can always go take a look at a different article, but these are the more popular types that I've been using. And the next thing comes along the input types comes are the placeholder tags that show you nice hint of what should be typed into a web page. And there are some various validation attributes like the what's the max length, what's the min length, that are frequently used. They have embedded that into HTML5, and if you look at a number, then it has a min and a max value right here. And you could also have required attributes, which says the when you submit this form, then that element is required. Let's make the name required rather than the date required, which makes more sense to me, right? Then let's go and take a look at this in a web page. So the beauty of HTML5 is you don't have to write any funky elements to show your calendar or anything like that. It's all, any browser that supports HTML5 will provide a calendar control. Okay, I'm going to submit a date, and let's go and try to submit the form. And since it says I set a required attribute on the name, it's showing, hey, fill out this field. Okay, let's say let's use my, and let's change my email address here real quick. And try to submit it. We missed out on the email address, so let's fix that. These are all the validations provided by HTML5. I had to do nothing. and then there is this beautiful color control that you can pick and choose a color, and then the numeric. So the rendering of these controls are completely dependent on the browser. If you look at Chrome, it shows up as an up and down, but if you look at IE or Firefox, it's a little different. So don't be confused about the rendering part of it. So I have a max and min, so I'm going to say 5000 here, click on submit, and it says, hey, the value must be less than 50. What happens if I enter a negative number, which I haven't tried? Let's try it. It must be greater than 1. So max and min values again, and let's say I'm going to submit that form, and it has submitted who is learning this HTML5. So let's try to look at how do we support older browsers. There is something called Modernizer. So all I have to do is add a link at the top to the script that says Modernizer. Typically you would use scripts at the bottom of your page after loading all the stuff, but for this case I'm just going to put it at the top. All you have to do is just download this modernizer.js class into your folder and refer it using this script tag here, and then it provides something called polyfills. So let's talk about Modernizer for a quick second. So what Modernizer provides is something called polyfills. A polyfill is something that gaps the holes in older browsers since they don't support HTML5 functionality. So think of polyfill as something like a placeholder to check if a feature is supported or not. So you need to use the polyfills to check if a certain feature, like a canvas, in the next session we will be talking about canvas. Let's say if a feature is supported or not. So let's take a look at a good example real quick and say, let's try to debug and see. With the new HTML5 there is something called audio and video controls, and you can check if your browser supports that by taking a look at using Modernizer. You can check if a feature is supported or not. Let's say if audio tag is not supported, then how would you do it? So since I have Visual Studio, it's giving me the IntelliSense, but you can check for various aspects of it. Hey, is this feature supported, like the canvas feature or animations? There are plenty of things. Input, web workers, WebGL, WebSockets, Web SQL database. These are the features of HTML5 which we'll be talking about in the next sessions. But again, you get the idea, right? So Modernizer is used to check if an existing feature is supported or not. Okay, I just added the debugger to show you if it is supported or not. Again, so let's wrap up this session real quick. I don't want to drag it too much, but hope it has given you some idea of how to use HTML5 semantics and the new input types and the validations. If you don't want to validate your form, then you could simply just let me show you that one last thing before we wrap up. You don't need this for where is this form control? All you have to do is, if you don't want to validate it, just say no validate and you're good. Okay, so again, let's hey, now I converted my HTML4 page into HTML5 that has semantics, but my page is not flying. The expectation of this session is, again, HTML5 semantics purely give you a logical definition of your web page, and adding those tags won't make your page behave any differently. Again, thank you for watching this session, and hope you had a good time watching this session.